Hey, I'm Chris, the Outreach Pastor, and welcome to episode 32 of the Reunion Church podcast. This is Sunday Recaps, where we discuss a couple key points from the previous service and help you navigate the spiritual formation process. And oh my gosh, did we have a record-breaking attendance or what? That was crazy last Sunday. Was that more people than Christmas, in all honesty?
I think it was pretty close to there. Yeah, it was pretty
It
cool.
was packed in the coffee house. I was actually really nervous before I went up there. Like, people just kept showing up before we started the message that I taught last night, and it was like, oh, cool. Like, I haven't taught in front of this many people in a long time. Like, I don't know these people. I don't know what expectations they have, and it was really cool. But I was not ready for it.
Yeah.
But it was cool. It was awesome.
We've had a few nights like that and that's where us praying for like a new space is like really important. So
Yeah.
That's what we're hoping. There's a conversation that we're having with Stead School, which is the high school build out here. And so for everyone listening, man, if you can be praying for that relationship with the Stead School, we talked with the principal. He's a really, really cool guy. They don't have a contract built out yet, but they're kind of open to it. So we're going to talk. We don't know, but
Right.
that would be, meeting in the high school would be absolutely amazing. So maybe that's why God was closing the door at Bison Ridge so that we could actually meet here instead. I don't know, but
Could be.
it was a really good conversation. So if everyone could just be praying for that. That would be huge, that we can actually get into that space at Stead School.
Yeah. So anyway, back to my nervous teaching. I feel like I did okay. You said I did actually a good job, so thanks for that.
So you got to teach. So we're going through the book of Philippians
Yes.
right now, and we're 11 verses in right now. And so what was, if when we're taking spec, sin to avoid, promise to keep, example to follow, command to obey, where would you kind of take this message, and like what would you kind of say is like the main theme is where you'd kind of take this?
Yeah. So I think
because it was 9 through 11, right?
Yeah, it was 9 through 11. Kind of the main. The weird part about this section, just when we were breaking it up and kind of talking about it, is like this is just an entire prayer that Paul puts in the middle of his letter to the Philippians. Like, he literally starts and then basically says, "Hey, I thank God for you," for like 8 verses, right? Greetings, and then thanks them for whatever, and then goes right into a prayer before going into the body of his text. And actually, the prayer is kind of like an overarching theme of the book of Philippians itself, right? It kind of touches on unity, it kind of touches on love, it kind of touches on all these little themes that you kind of pointed out in the early intros. So really, it was kind of just this appeal to God in the present for something that was going to happen in the future, that they would pursue greater godliness in the future, with that ultimate aim of just worshiping God in everything they do. So that was kind of like what Paul was going at with that prayer, of kind of in a way, setting the tone for the rest of the letter of like, this is what, like, you guys are doing really good, but keep going, sort of thing, keep furthering your faith. So that was kind of what we focused on last night.
And it wasn't necessarily like a word for word prayer like we would think about solemn. Yeah. But it was like, I pray this for you, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially. An intercession. Is that
intercession. And that was one where I kind of went back and forth on whether or not it was worth talking about intercession, because, like, again, I could have talked about sanctification. That is an idea in this passage. I could have talked about how there's a continuation of our faith. Like, there's all these big ideas, but again, when you're talking to so many people, the bigger the words, the less actually rings true to a lot of people. So I usually kind of avoid that terminology. But like, intercession, kind of had to mention it. And it's basically the idea of where you intercede. It literally means to go between the needs. So you're going between the needs of others. And in prayer, we're going in between the needs of others' situations, others' struggles, others' problems, and praying for them, interceding on their behalf. Hey, this person may have not gone to you, God, but I'm going to pray for Will or John or whoever it might be, whatever people God puts on your heart that the Spirit empowers you to pray for. That's kind of intercession of like, hey, this person's going through a lot. Be their brother, be their sister in Christ. Intercede, intervene, right? And be that ambassador of Christ for them, sort of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, kind of taking spec, where would you kind of place this verse? Because spec is a way that we've been studying the Bible, that we're learning how to study the Bible, right? It's an acronym and it's an easy way. You highlight or you mark up your Bible so you know kind of the context of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what we're talking about, S is a sin to avoid, P is a promise to keep, E is an example to follow, C is a command to obey, and then N is a knowledge or knowledge of God.
Yeah.
And so where would you kind of take and kind of put this verse when you were kind of studying through it, is in kind of that spec study?
Yeah. So like this even came up in our small groups because as we broke up, we went over spec literally to like walk through step by step of here's where you see spec. And I think there are two main things here. The first was the overall prayer itself, just that the fact that he was praying for them, he was praying over them. That was an example to follow. The fact that Paul, in spite of all that he was going through, because he's in prison, he's going through a tough time, and yet he's still praying for what's going on in that situation, so there's that example to follow. And then there was some commands to obey of that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and discernment, right? An informed love, a understanding, a discerning love of not just love is love, but like a biblical godly love, that you are commanded to love in that way, not just any way.
There's a lot of questions around that because it's very interesting how Paul defines like how we should grow in love. He doesn't say that we should grow in love in like an emotion. But he says it, and I think it's in verse 10, right? Or is it in verse 11?
Verse 9. So verse 9 says, I've got it right here. Okay. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Verse 9 is that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, right? So
So it's very interesting because a lot of times when we're like, oh, like you should grow more and more in love, we think that it's more of like an emotional, like
right.
You feel more and more in love, but that's not what he says here.
Right.
Can you kind of explain a little bit more like this knowledge and discernment? What is that talking about? What are we kind of looking at here?
Yeah, and actually, this isn't my idea. We've been studying a lot of I think it's Francis Chan, and I want to say, is it David Platt, or who's the other author of the commentary?
Platt's on it. We also, Worsby.
So, we know that we're not the best preachers and commentators, so we go to experts, right? You go to the experts for what they're good at, not what they're bad at.
This is what every pastor does too. So
so they know what they're talking about, and they pointed this out of it all starts with the knowledge of God sort of thing, like knowing what Jesus did, knowing what he shared and taught, and the example he lived. That's what we know love is. Like he gave the example, and then we kind of emulate the example as little Christians, right? So by knowing God, it leads us to limitless acts of love for other people, where people who don't deserve it, people who have been there, done that again and again and again, it motivates us to kind of go after those people in an active way, not a static way of like a lot of churches are like stale and they don't do anything for the lost or the poor or the sick or the ostracized or whatever group it is that's just outside of those church walls.
Yeah.
God, just knowing what God did, knowing what Jesus did on the cross motivates us to emulate what he did, sort of thing. So it's kind of weird how the more you know about God, the more loving and emotional you can be, like emotionally intelligent for somebody in a situation. So it was really cool. I thought really cool how they pulled that out in a way that I haven't heard before.
So that was the knowledge aspect. What about the discernment? What does the discernment then kind of play into?
Yeah. So the knowledge aspect is more of the informed, and then the discernment is more of that understanding. So like the emotional intelligence, understanding someone's situation.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Understanding I called it the vibe check. Like when you walk into a room and you just know what the vibe is instantly and no one has to say anything, right? It's that sort of like, that's kind of what discernment is. Like, my dad is a massive nerd. He calls it his spider sense, his spidey sense, where he can walk into a room and spiritually just tell like, oh, I need to talk to that guy. That person's going through it. That person's doing really well. And you just know by walking into a room. So
we talked about it, like, so basically you grow more in knowledge and love. You
Yeah.
need to know what love is and what that really looks like.
Right.
And so knowledge is just knowing. Discernment is how to actually do it,
Yeah.
right? That's discernment is the practical application of just how to actually go about doing it.
Yeah.
And in our group, we were kind of talking through that because we were like, well, how are we supposed to love people? How are we supposed to do this for
Right.
people that are like, that might have been abusive or people that are a struggle and stuff? Out, please. Okay. So we have dogs.
So you have a dog. Yeah, your dog walked in.
2 dogs and a child walking that way, sneaking. So, but yeah, they were like, well, how do we actually like love someone that maybe was abusive or someone that like, like they need to be loved differently. And that's the discernment part. Like you're not going to love everyone exactly the same.
Right.
You should love them a little bit different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like, even, it didn't come up in the conversation, but even just thinking about that, I'm thinking of people that I know who started the foster care process.
Yeah.
And how even there are a lot of very specific. So like, I'm a frequent visitor for my sister who's started foster care, and they have someone that they're taking care of, and I'm not even allowed to say the name, what gender, anything like that. Like there's rules to caring for this person, right? And she gave me a laundry list of papers I had to fill out just to be a frequent visitor, just to protect this person, right? To have that understanding of like, hey, just because this is a kid does not mean it's a normal kid who's gone through normal situation, like there's a method. Like you might have the right motive to like, oh, be nice, be caring. Well, they've gone through it, but you need to have the right method and approach with people in those situations. And only God's discernment can do that, because a lot of times we do the wrong thing for the right reasons all the time. So it's absolutely critical. And that's how we avoid church hurt too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of pastors think they're know-it-alls, and they just like, oh, well, you need to do this. And then it just makes a bad situation way worse.
Yeah. So what would be the main thing that we should take away and apply to our lives here today through those passages? Like, what would you say through a couple of passages of like, you know what, as a church, as Christians, we should take away from this passage doing this?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, we're commanded to intercede for others. That's the main thing. That as Paul interceded for the church in Philippi, for the Philippians, we too should intercede for everybody in our community, everybody in our silos, to carry on in the faith. And this whole passage was really directed to Christians. So that would be my encouragement to Christians, is that, you should carry on the faith. That's what we're called to do. And really the main takeaway is that it starts with the mind. And that's really why this whole series is called Mindset in Philippians, is that our mindset kind of determines the measures for loving all people, right? And if we have the right mindset towards Christ, towards the things of God, which I think we'll get to later in a little more detail, in the book of Philippians and Colossians and stuff like that, but it starts there before you know how to actually help and care for people, so our mindset determines our measures for loving all people, period. Like it starts with the inward man, as Paul talks about, with the pure and blameless. And the blameless part is the measures of helping somebody.
Yeah. And then, so what would happen if we fail to do this? Like, if we don't do this intercession, like what's at stake for us as a Christians, for us as a church as a whole? What's the harm being done when we're not following this out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, small picture, you're not being obedient personally. So like on the personal level, you're not being obedient to what God's commanded, right? This is a command from God. On the more social level, we're not actually being a part of our community and being connected to our community, looking out for the needs of others, interceding on their behalf. And then at the highest level, our highest aim is to honor God. We're not really doing our best to commit to the Great Commission of, going out to all the nations and discipling them and being there for them and building that community. So I think there's multiple layers of, no, you really should like think about this intercession thing. Like it's a big deal. It's a big idea. Mm-hmm. It's not just like some obscure word in the Bible. Like it's critical to your spiritual development, because you're just going to stagnate, because you can only grow so much without other people. and vice versa, helping other people or people helping you. So
Yeah. Do you, because this was one of the things that we spent a lot of time kind of talking about,
yeah.
was that does love motivate us to pray, or does prayer motivate us to love someone more? What's kind of your thoughts from studying through this?
Is it prayer first or love first? Can I cheat?
Yeah, because
Yes.
that's probably
Okay.
what I did too.
Yeah,
Like,
I was about to say.
that was my answer.
There's
Like-
there's kind of two. I'm thinking from a church history perspective, depending on what side of the aisle, so to speak. If I was Catholic, I would say the prayer motivates me to love. But if I was like Protestant, which is what we are, I would say the love kind of motivates us to pray, motivates us to do those works, you know.
Okay.
But even then,
Weird take. But
yeah. Well, you asked. That's a tough question, Andrew.
I wasn't where I was going to go.
Where were you going to go? Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Keep on going. I want to see where this goes.
Yeah. So either way, I think what it came down to is that you can't have the knowledge of God and then not have love abound more and more, and then you can't have love abound more and more without the knowledge of God. Like they're kind of interlocked, like two chains, and that's what we talked about in our small group of like, well, again, kind of like faith and works and all that whole conversation. Both those things kind of happen at the same time. You know, if you're truly pursuing your vertical relationship, your God relationship, the horizontal relationships will fall in line, right? Like God will give you the discernment and all that, but like you don't have to strive or try to like, oh, I need to be a kind person. I need to be a good person. Well, you can't. You're bad. You're awful. Focus on the God relationship. God will focus on the other relationships in your life, and he will give you the wisdom, the knowledge, the tools to help people, the methods. Just focus on that motivation part. What is your actual motivation? Is it selfish of like, oh, I just helped somebody and I posted on social media and stuff like that? Or is it you're genuinely fulfilling a need that no one else is meeting? Like, because there is a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's like, God is the one who will motivate anyone to actually love someone.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why we don't pray a lot is because of apathy. It's not that we don't like someone, because I think we feel more convicted when we don't like someone to actually pray for them.
Yeah.
Like, man, I don't like this person. Like, so I think but it's the apathy of like, I don't really care, you know?
Yeah. And we're actually a lot more likely to pray if it's someone we hate. Like I've done that a lot of like, God, help me not to hate this person. That's usually the prayer. It's usually focused on me and performance, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point of like, we're just very apathetic to the needs of our neighbors and people in our silos. Like we just don't care in a sense. Like it doesn't cross our mind of like, oh, they're probably going through similar things as me, and I have answers that they don't, you know, like kind of like what I was saying at the end of my teaching. Like we're all kind of in this collective pursuit, like this mass migration towards meaning. We have the meaning, we have the motivation, right?
Yeah.
And it's selfish to kind of keep that to yourself and not share it with other people, you know? So
yeah. Was there anything that you studied that you really wanted to kind of throw in, but like you just didn't have the time or it just didn't fit?
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept of the inward, then the outward, the pure, then blameless was an interesting idea. Where Francis Chan and all those guys kind of talk about how in that culture, there was a distinction in their day because you had your public image, right? And then there was a strong emphasis on purity. So like purity, no one actually knows if you're pure of heart. Like you could tell me right now you're pure of heart and be like, okay, I just got to take your word for it, right? That's the inward you. I don't actually know what's going on in your heart.
Yeah.
Whereas blameless, you can't be blameless unless there's somebody that could blame you, right? It's a public thing. It's an image thing. So we talked about that in the small groups, and there was a good section in that commentary that kind of helped guided, but it didn't fit in the message. When you're trying to go 15 minutes, you can only say so much. So
yeah,
but there's always cool stuff like that. And yeah, especially with these longer passages we'll do later in the series. I'm like, geez, how are we going to cover everything in 15 minutes?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Any last words you kind of want to throw out there at all as we're going through the study at all that you're really enjoying or anything picking up?
I'm just enjoying the fact that we're doing this, like the fact that we're doing an actual, like a legitimate Bible. Because like you ever been invited to those Bible studies where like, oh, we're doing a Bible study, and it's one guy with an opinion, and it's the most useless, like you know, there's a lot of rude ways to say it, but just some guy wasting your time being egotistical, I guess, of just like, oh, look at me, I know all the things about the Bible and listen to my
Right.
opinions and my views. And it's like, well, okay, who cares? Like, we're
Yeah.
all equals, right? You know? And kind of like what I said earlier, go to the experts for what they're expertise in. The guy that the solo dude running a Bible study is an expert in being prideful. He's not an expert in the Bible. Like,
Yeah.
like if I want to know how to be prideful, I could talk to a dude like that. Like, hey, why do you need all these people to like, yes, whatever you say, yep, versus with our small groups, we had a guy named Jeff in my group and Luann. We had Nick, who was a really cool guy, brought his apologetics edge to it, kind of bringing his insights. Like, with that small group setting, we're all on equal footing. Even though I was the one up there, hearing their insights was like really cool, really, really cool.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Cool, man. Well, yeah, I'm excited for us to keep on going. This week is going to be Easter, so we're going to take a break going through Philippians.
Yep.
And actually, we're going to be doing a Easter service at 10 a.m. At the Reunion Coffee House. Would love everyone to kind of join us. We're going to have a good time. And then afterwards is an Easter egg hunt for the kiddos around the Reunion Park area. So we're very excited for that. Mm-hmm. Would love to see as many people out there as possible. It'll be a great time. Short message, and some worship, very classy. The kids will sit with us and everything, but we're very excited for it, and excited to celebrate with everyone else, especially talking through the resurrection. After going through the grace study and the grace series, and the importance of the resurrection and what that does, it's added a special flavor, I guess, to the resurrection. So
special sauce.
Yes, special sauce. So yeah, I'm excited for it. But other than that, man, we have good Passover service on the.
I kept calling it kosher instead of Passover. That's just me, but it's called Passover. That's not the name.
Yeah,
I was like, Passover. You go to kosher? Wait a minute.
Yeah, no, that's not it.
Yeah,
Passover on Friday. You need to register for it because there's going to be food catered and all that stuff. So it's going to be great. There's like 160 people registered for that.
Ridiculous.
It's crazy amount. That's going to be at Bison Ridge.
Yep.
And then Sunday is going to be Easter service, 10 a.m. Mm-hmm. And then on the 29th, we have Secret Church, which is going to be a very cool thing that we're doing about prayer. And we're going to be going through that. That starts at like 7 p.m. and it goes to like 1 in the. So it's a very, very cool event that we're doing. David Platt kind of puts it on, and we'll be listening and watching some of his stuff. And we'll be doing that here in the Reunion area. Right. And then May 29th, is that what we decided? Or was it?
Yeah, literally a month later, May 29th at 5:30, we'll do a mental health day. So essentially, David and myself are kind of helping get this together. We're the two pastors kind of working on this, and we're gonna have like a panel of experts just talk about mental health. So we've got a couple that we're reaching out to kind of on child psychology, kind of on trauma psychology, just on mental health in general. Like, hey, what even is this? Like, and we could talk about a lot of topics with that day because mental health is everything that happens in the mind. But we're really going to focus on anxiety, depression, suicide, and then how God fits into that whole picture. So it should be a really good event. It'll be a public event. So if you know someone who's Christian or not Christian, doesn't matter. We're just going to give a Christian perspective as well. So just know that going into it. But we will have panel experts that are clinical psychologists and all that showing up as well.
Yep. So
awesome.
That's pretty much it. You do your little wrap up thing. I don't know what you say.
Do you want me to say the wrap up thing?
Yeah.
You thing into a little bow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty it up.
I will.
So I can say toodles.
Did you say bow it up?
Yeah.
Okay. I will bow it up. Thank guys for listening to this latest episode of the Reunion Church podcast. We really appreciate your prayer and support. If you want to support Reunion Church, you can go to reunionchurchcc.com and go to the Support Us tab, and you can tithe there, or just keep us in your prayers. We really need it. Trying to figure out a new location is a big deal so that I can stop being nervous with the amount of people crowded in one room when I'm preaching, and other more important reasons like bigger kids ministry, better things we can do for the community with a bigger space. So definitely pray for that. Also pray for all these events that are coming up. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up in the summer. And again, if you want to know why we always talk about discipleship, join one of our discipleship groups. We've got a women's one on Wednesdays, Andrew's got one on Tuesdays, and then I'll be having one during the work week as well, starting up as well. So if you want to join one of those groups, hit us up. We'd love to kind of encourage you, tell you why we do discipleship, and you can just tag along and see what it's all about. So with that said, we'll catch you guys next week, and have a good one.
Toodles.